Hey there! This is a edited down video made from a much larger discussion. If you want to see that much larger discussion, then go ahead and check out our MetAphor playlist and watch the VODs. Or if you want to participate in these conversations yourself, go ahead and follow on Twitch for the next time we're live, streaming every Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. Enjoy the video. Let me explain my core frustration. My core frustration is that the developers, and they've said this in interviews, this isn't me pulling things out of my butt, they've said this in interviews, that they really want the game to focus on its political themes, and on politics in general, but the political themes are the worst thing about the game. Like, they easily just are. They're so ill-conceived. The political themes of the game can be essentially boiled down to democracy good, racism bad, which I know I've said that probably a million times before, but only because it's still true, and it's particularly frustrating. It's particularly frustrating because the game tries to focus so much on it. And so it really seems like the developers genuinely think that they've created some sort of political magnum opus here, but they haven't. What they've created is the most normie, liberal, Reddit tier explanation and view of politics I've seen in a video game ever. And there's no way around it. It's like, democracy good. Like, really? They actually think they have something here. It's like, no, you have nothing interesting to say. Nothing at all. I wish you did. I wish you had something interesting to say. Even if it was something I disagreed with, but it doesn't have anything interesting to say. What are its arguments? Its arguments are morality is subjective, unless you're Louis, in which case you're evil. Religion is subjective unless you're Christian, in which case you're evil. All religions are equal, but some are more equal than others. It seems to suggest that religion as a concept is inherently corrupt, or at least inherently corruptible, which is not really an interesting concept. And it kind of leaves me thinking, like, what am I supposed to do with that, really? It's not like democracy good, racism bad is at all controversial. It's just affirming what popular culture already believes to be true. So it's already not any sort of... It can't be a political masterclass. It's just... You can't really expect me to be interested in what you have to say when what you have to say isn't anything new. Then on top of that, almost adding insult to injury, is the fact that when it does stray from the norm, which is rare, when it does stray from the norm, it's so incredibly radical. And in fairness, some of this is definitely just because of recent political events, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, but the manner in which the game treats the topic of political assassination tells me it doesn't really take it seriously. With Louis, it was one thing. Louis killed the king, he was credibly accused of killing the prince, and so killing him, it's sort of what would you say, it's non-controversial. He's objectively evil, he has committed grave crimes, and he needs to be brought to justice, but no one's interested in bringing him to justice. And on top of that, killing him would save a life. So you're killing an evil person to save the life of a friend. Not only a friend who we consider to be largely good. And so that seems like a relatively clear moral choice. Relatively. Relatively is doing a lot of work there, but it's a relatively inoffensive choice. Killing an evil person to save a good person. But what's the problem with that exactly? Kind of hard to argue against that in a way that's coherent. Then we find out Louis didn't kill the prince. He did kill the king. And he's definitely still evil in a pretty objective sense of the word. But he didn't do that. At the very least, he didn't do that. We fight Louis because we think he killed the king and the prince. We find out he didn't, but we're still trying to kill him anyway. But now we're not killing him to save a life, we're just killing him for the sake of killing him. And because he's an evil bastard, that's true. There are a lot of reasons to want him dead, but we no longer have the justification of saving a life. That justification no longer exists. So now all of a sudden we're thrust into moral gray. And rather than killing him for the purpose of saving a life, we're now just killing him for the sake of our political ambitions, because we think he might get in the way of that, which is obviously a very different sort of premise. What was a quest to save a life instead becomes a quest for political ambition, and really more of a utilitarian kind of mode. And so it becomes gray in that sense, because we are effectively killing him for the sake of politics. And because, obviously, you could say, well, if he's alive, you know, he might do something else. And realistically, it hasn't happened yet. We don't know if we're actually going to kill him or not, but there hasn't even really been talks of imprisonment. Whenever the heroes talk about dealing with Louis, imprisonment is never put on the table. Not really. The notion of trying to settle this non-violently, or at least non-lethally, is never really brought up. It doesn't seem to be on the table at all. And then, when we learn that Forden is the one who or when we believe that Forden is the one who casts a spell, they become so cavalier. It's like, oh, well, let's kill him. Well, if he's the one who did it, we'll just kill him instead. It's like, why is that immediately what comes to mind? First of all, you don't even know if he did do it, which would seem to be an immediate problem. And even if he did, you don't know why he did it. And even then, you're not even really considering the possibility that there could be other options here. It just, that's what they immediately jump to. They're so cavalier about it. They don't, there's a brief moment after they kill Louis where they have this sort of come to Jesus like, oh, shoot, like, what have we done? Like, we might have just killed him, even though he wasn't guilty of what we supposed him to be guilty of, and that makes things a bit more morally complicated, and they seem to acknowledge that. Then we sort of brush past it and act like it doesn't matter because, well, he actually survived. As if the fact that we almost killed a man for a crime he didn't commit had no moral significance whatsoever. As if that just didn't matter. I kind of reject that premise. Like, well, you know, it's true that if Louis had died, our actions would have become more morally complicated. But he didn't. But we thought he did, and we intended to do that anyway, and that should be a cause for reflection. But it's not. Not really. Like, yeah, you know, if you have a fascist, or in this case, like, sort of anarchist, they talk about him like he's a fascist. Like, oh, he wants to oppress the weak. No, that's not his objective. That's not what he wants. He makes that apparently very clear. Like, if someone opposes your political objectives, you can just kill him. Why not? That seems to be the attitude. No, I kinda reject that. So, to review, the game has nothing new or interesting to say. Not really. And just sort of blindly and non-critically supports the generic liberal paradigm for society. And even though it's, what would you say, it's ordinary objectives, even though it's sort of ordinary objectives are normal, its means of getting there are radical, it completely shrugs at the idea of political assassination, just unbothered by it. It's not bothered by it at all. It's not bothered by the concept of killing your political enemies just for the fact that they disagree with you. And then the final, and I think most egregious part of it all, is that they don't actually have an argument. The game has never tried to explain why Louis or Forden are wrong. Louis wants to create a world where the strong are able to succeed without being hindered by bureaucracy or social conventions. Why is that wrong? The best the game can muster, and I think this is being pretty generous, the best the game can muster is that, well, the weak would suffer. Why should I care about the weak? Why should I? The game doesn't tell me why, because I don't think the game knows why. Forden wants to create peace through religious unity. Why is that wrong? Why is that wrong? I don't think the game can explain why that's wrong. And so, in order to get around the fact that they can't explain why their opponents are wrong, they make their opponents evil. Imagine a world where Louis was lawful neutral, where he wasn't an assassin, where he wasn't committing atrocities, where he didn't have a secret plan to destroy the world, and he was just an ideologue, and everything that he said was true at its face value. Why would our heroes oppose him? Why would our heroes oppose him? Our heroes oppose him because he's evil. What if he wasn't evil? What if he wasn't evil? What if he wasn't personally evil? What's wrong with his ideology? Forden wants to create a world unified through religion. Tell me why that's wrong. Explain to me why that's wrong. Well, he killed the prince. Well, he killed the... I don't care. I don't care. Imagine a world where Forden was lawful neutral, and he didn't do all of the obviously corrupt and evil things that he did. Just his ideology. What is wrong with his ideology? The game can't explain why. The game can't tell you why. And since they can't tell you why, they caricature their enemies as being almost unbelievably evil. We're in the game's final act, and the game can't tell me why the main villain is wrong. That's why I've soured on the game. It doesn't have an argument. Diversity good is not an argument. Why is diversity good? Oppression bad is not an argument. Tell me why oppression is bad. And the game can't do that. Ultimately, because the reason why oppression is bad is because people are made in the image of God. And if you don't believe that people are made in the image of God, then there's no reason not to oppress people. If there is no God, then there is no inherent goodness in humanity. If there's no inherent goodness in humanity, then there's no reason not to mistreat humanity for the sake of utilitarian ends. If humans do not have a divine and inherent goodness to them, then there is no reason why you shouldn't be able to mistreat humans for the sake of broader goals and objectives. And this game doesn't believe that. This game does not believe that there is any inherent goodness to people aside from just being alive, I guess. But that's not sufficient. That's really not sufficient. And if it seems like I'm holding this game to a higher standard than it can meet, I don't think I am. The game chose to be political. The developers wanted this game to be political. That's what they wanted. That's what they wanted. The reason this game doesn't have romance is because the developers wanted you to think more about the political themes of the game. But how am I supposed to get into the political themes of the game when the protagonists don't have a political ideology? And the only semblance of a political ideology I can find is as shallow as can be. It's as shallow as democracy good, oppression bad. Why is democracy good? Why is oppression bad? They can't tell me. They can't tell me. And once you realize that they can't tell you why, you see it everywhere. You see it through the whole game. Christianity is bad. Why is Christianity bad? The best example I can give is, well, they just think there's just thoughts and prayers. They don't actually do anything. Your critique of the Catholic Church is that they don't take care of the sick? How retarded are you? Truly, I don't want to use strong language. How retarded do you have to be to say something like that? How disconnected from reality do you have to be to say something? And that seems to be its only critique. It's like, well, forgiveness is a tool to control people. How? Ah, yes, authoritarian regimes and their emphasis on forgiveness. Which, by the way, that's another little thing. The game believes that forgiveness is a tool for oppression. That's what they say. They say that explicitly. The game believes that forgiveness is a tool for oppression. That should be a major red flag. And once you see that they think forgiveness is inherently wrong, that they think forgiveness is a virtue of the corrupt and the wicked, a virtue that the corrupt and the wicked use to control the masses, it makes the protagonist's actions, it makes so much more sense. Why do the protagonists feel justified in killing all their political opponents? Well, because forgiveness is a sin. Because forgiveness is wrong. Forgiveness is a tool to control people. What's the alternative to forgiveness? Let me ask the game. Game, what is the alternative to forgiveness if forgiveness is wrong? And it tells us, violent revolution. That's what they want. Kill your political opponents, resort to any means necessary. That's what they believe. The game firmly believes that the ends justify the means, and it doesn't seem very shy about saying that. Pinnacle of this is, fittingly, Basilio and Fidelio's story arc. Basilio and Fidelio are introduced saying, we don't care what happens to the weak, as long as Louis gets what's his. As long as Louis gets what's his, we don't care. And then what happens? What happens? So they have, when they're introduced, they have no qualms whatsoever killing everyone on the pagan island for the sake of their objectives. None. They have no issues whatsoever. And then it's kind of revealed that, well, they have some goodness in their hearts. They're not unforgivable, but they've also very clearly been indoctrinated into this utilitarian mode of thinking. And so, okay, that makes sense. So, Basilio and Fidelio are introduced, not caring if innocent people die. Not a bit. Like, they do not care. What happens to make them care? So far as I can tell, nothing. I think the most charitable view you can have is that they realize, well, we were weak once, and we were weak once, and so Louis would have killed us back then, or he would have been able to justify killing us. It's like, yeah, he would have. That's kind of the whole point of your ideology. And so I really have no idea what you're talking about. The reason you idolize Louis is because he had pity on you when you were weak. And so now you're turning on him, but why? Louis didn't do anything. Louis at all points behaved entirely in character. And I don't think the game is capable of explaining what happened, of explaining what changed. And I feel pretty confident saying that, because I think if they could have, they would have. But they really didn't. They really didn't. Basilio, and in fairness, Basilio's not exactly the thinker, but even Fidelio in his final moments, he couldn't really explain why. Like, you can ask me right now, like, why did they switch sides? And the answer is, I don't know. They were upset with Louis because he mistreats the weak, and they were weak once, which means that by extension, Louis would have been able to justify mistreating them. But they knew that already. That wasn't new information. Opinion, you don't change your mind when you learn something you already knew. You could say, well, they realized that there was another way, that they didn't have to do that. There was actually another way to improving the world. And they realized that through observing us, the protagonist, and our shenanigans. That would make sense. Except that they don't say that. They don't say that. This is the closest thing we've gotten to an explanation. I get where you're coming from. After a while, feels like it wouldn't be so bad to see this country turn to ash. Louis will break everything apart, that I have no doubt. The injustice will be gone, sure, but also the good things, the important things, he'll come for it all. Yeah, Louis is an anarchist, basically. He thinks society is a bad thing because it restricts what the strong are capable of. But hearing the game say he's going to destroy everything about society, including the good things, Basilio, what are the good things about society? Because no one has been able to point that out. No one in the main cast has been able to explain what good society can do or is capable of, or does in the current day. No one can explain that. Friends, family, that's not society. This is a world without tears over injustice. But what is injustice? What is justice? What does it mean to be just or unjust? The game doesn't even seem interested in raising the question, much less answering it. In conclusion, in summary, I'm frustrated by the game's inability to explain or justify itself. It doesn't seem interested in even trying. Like, why are your actions moral? No. I don't know why my actions are moral, so I'm just gonna say that you are immoral, if you suggest that there's such a thing as morality. Why is your philosophy good, and how will it manifest tangible goods for society writ large? I don't know. Society's bad. Corruption. We're gonna get rid of corruption. Okay, getting rid of corruption is fine and good. How do you define corruption? How will you prevent corruption in the future? Why is corruption wrong? There's so much that the game takes for granted. Things that the game really needs to explain, but it doesn't. Like, yeah, we get it. We get it. We don't like corruption. No one does. Getting rid of corruption, that's well and good, but what will you instill in its place? How will you prevent it? I don't think it's too much to ask for a game that is asking me to focus on its political themes, to analyze its politics, and ask for something tangible. My core frustrations are that the game can't explain why it believes what it believes, or why it's right and its opponents are wrong, despite the fact that it can't explain why it's right and its opponents are wrong. It still feels justified in murdering its opponents just because they oppose. Just because they have opposing visions for the world. Not only does that strike me as being wrong in a very real way, it strikes me as being irresponsible. And I think you kind of see that in a lot of the game's fan base. Like, I'll admit, there's a degree to which this is conjecture, but I feel like the overlap between this game's hardcore fan base and the people who cheered on the death of Charlie Kirk and who cheer for the murder of people like him, I feel like they're concentric circles. If there are MetAphor fans who don't think that way, it's only because they either enjoy the game in spite of its political themes, or they haven't bothered to actually think about the implications of what the game is trying to say. As an artist, as an author, I don't take these things lightly. It's true, and there is a degree to which I want to be charitable. Because as an author of both fiction and non-fiction, one of the things I've been trying to do as a bit of a conscious choice, especially in my last few essays — I haven't written an essay in a while, but in the last few essays that I have written — is writing less caveats and not obsessing so much about trying to cover every possible circumstance or every possible misinterpretation. Because the reality is, it doesn't matter how careful you are. If someone doesn't like you, they're going to deliberately interpret what you write in in a hostile way. And it doesn't matter how clear you are or how clear you try to be. And so I've made a deliberate effort of not worrying so much. Not worrying so much about how other people interpret what I write, so long as what I write is clear. You know, you flash back to the Jordan Peterson interview where it's like, so what you mean is like, no, what I mean is what I said. What I mean is what I said. But it doesn't matter how clear you are. Someone's always gonna hit you by the, so what you mean is. And so I can understand. You can't cover every possible interpretation of what you say. And there's also, like, I don't think slippery slope is a fallacy, but it is true that if you say, well, 2 is a good thing, and someone might say, 2? What's next? 4? Like, no, there is such a thing as moderation, and stories don't always have the time or the range to show both sides of the spectrum, to show both the good side and the bad side of what you're talking about. Talking about stories, I have 80 hours in this game. I think the game has time to show both the good and bad sides of the spectrum. I think the game does have the time and the breadth to address both extremes. You can't express both extremes in a Twitter post. You can't always express it in an essay or in a short story, but when you're 80 hours, like, I'll be honest, like where I am right now, just mentally, if I weren't live streaming this, I probably would have stopped by now.